As we say goodbye to 2019, 2020 is upon us.
That we can continue to work to ensure that our country stays close together.
China has identified the cause of a mysterious new virus. Coronavirus.
There are fears a rapidly spreading virus has reached Australia.
Terrified, anxiety, confusion, hopelessness. My name is Alex, the producer of this documentary. You're about to watch a collaboration of content creators worldwide coming together to share their experiences.
Fear.
Uncertainty.
Questioning.
To not be hateful.
We owe so much to them.
Surreal.
It's already destroying the family.
Fortunate.
Forever, never forget.
Is the most heartbreaking of all.
It's just so tragic.
Including insights from health and education professionals to business owners. These are real stories of actual events from all over the world.
Wuhan, a city of more than 10 million people, known as a manufacturing and trade hub of China. Behind me is the Jinyintan Hospital. The World Health Organization was giving warnings about the severity and the alarming transmissibility of this virus as it was happening. The city of Wuhan was locked down for 76 days. The human cost of this lockdown will almost never be known. The courage of the country's medical experts, both local and nationwide, was somewhat of a miracle, both controlling the local and domestic spread and the international transmission as well. In this documentary, we traveled to 6 continents, sharing the true life experiences to expose the human costs of this tragedy. We felt that these stories needed to be told.
Coronavirus outbreak in Europe is in Lombardy province in northern Italy. More people have died here than anywhere else, and they still are, every day.
60 years ago, my grandfather moved from the poorest part of Italy to the capital, Rome. He had with him a big bottle of extra virgin olive oil, and then he decided to split the bottle into 3 smaller bottles and then sold this bottle on the streets. Once he made some money, he bought some veggies and sold the veggies. Then he bought more veggies and sold everything. Then he started buying chickens, other animals, more veggies, and his business expanded. At first, he was traveling with a bicycle, then he passed to a motorcycle, then he bought a car, then he bought a van, and then finally he was able to build his own shop. The shop became my father's shop, and it grew bigger, it completely expanded. Italy was thriving, let's say until 2008. In 2008, the Italian economy did hit a wall. A huge crisis started. People lost their jobs, a few shops survived, and somehow we made it. We made it through, but our happiness didn't last longer because at some point we lost our father, my father. And then a few years later, COVID hit. The Italian government shut down our shop for months while still forcing us to pay taxes. Since COVID-19 did hit, over 100,000 businesses shut down in Italy, Millions of people suddenly they were without jobs, and the middle class completely disappeared, and suicides skyrocketed. People stopped caring about the quality of the clothes. Why do you need clothes if you never get out of the house? Why do you need clothes if you're always in lockdown and work on your computer on a pyjama? So suddenly the income of the shop started going lower and lower until we did hit very deep waters. Somehow we survived 2020, somehow we survived 2021, but after 50 years, this shop is not gonna be able to survive 2022. Selling the shop will probably kill my grandpa, and it's already destroying the family, so this is the human cost of COVID-19 in Italy, in my family.
Sometimes when I think about it, it almost feels like my life before the pandemic and my life right now are two completely different lives. The pandemic turned my life upside down, and I went from someone who used to really love life to someone who felt lonely, isolated, and miserable a lot of the time. And most important of all, I felt really angry and really disappointed in myself. Before the pandemic, I used to be always surrounded by friends. I used to travel a lot. I was building up my YouTube channel. I finally managed to get a book deal. I wrote a book which took me almost 6 years to write, and I finally managed to land a publisher, and we had a contract in place. Everything was ready. My book was supposed to be published, and then it was all taken away from me. It felt like in a blink of an eye, my whole world changed. And I moved to a new city half a year before the pandemic, so I was stuck in this tiny apartment all by myself. My friends were not there, my family was not there, and I also lost my book deal, because if I would work harder, if I would manage to get that book out there at least half a year earlier, it would happen. I would accomplish the biggest dream I had ever since I was a kid. And then at the same time, I felt like I didn't have the right to complain. I didn't have the right to talk about it, because so many people had it worse than me. Not being able to publish a book is not the worst thing that can happen to you. People were getting sick and losing everything they had, and I still had a roof over my head. I was still healthy, so who was I to complain, I first realized how much it affected me and how big of a toll it took on me when I finally received the very first copy of my book. And then one day I was sitting here on my kitchen floor, I received the package, and I wanted to film my reaction seeing my book for the very first time. And I opened the box and I looked at my book, and I couldn't even smile. I couldn't even be happy for myself. It almost felt like I had no emotions left in me. I think in a way I almost didn't dare to be happy, because I was so scared that things will go wrong again. That was the moment when I realized that I need to stop waiting. I need to stop waiting for my old life to come back, because it might never come back. Who knows? I needed to learn to live in this new reality where doing things that I love and spending time with people that I love is no longer as easy as it used to be. I will never know what it would feel like if that book deal would go through. I would never know what it would feel like celebrating publishing of my book with my friends and not sitting alone on my kitchen floor. But the thing is that I can't really do anything about it. I need to accept that it is what it is, and all I can do, I guess, is hope for the best. I mean, that's the only thing we can do, right?
Angelique Coutier is the South African doctor who first detected new symptoms in patients who had contracted COVID-19. While she says the symptoms are...
Hello, my name is Jose. I'm from Rwanda. The last 2 years has been really tough for me as a student, both mentally and financially. I can't experience something like depression because I couldn't talk to anybody. In my school, I was the only one remained. It was really hard for us, and I never experienced lockdown before. It was my first time. So I was depressed, and my family back home, they couldn't work because of lockdown. So the financial status also was really bad. I would say I'm proud of my government, because as a country in Africa, which is really hard to get some medical staffs and medical apparatus, they really did a great job. The situation in my country right now is really good because everything is back to normal. The advice I can give to some people out there viewing this video is, if you have somebody, just check on them. They might be having some depression. If you know somebody, just check on them, at least one person per day, and also do a great job on caring about your life. If you have something to talk about, find someone to talk to.
Hello, my name is Laura. I'm from South Africa. I think when it really got to me was when my brother and my father both got COVID-19, and I was very concerned because my parents are a little bit older. I was last born, so just feeling helpless in that situation was quite a dark time for me. At least they both recovered. That's the best I can ask for, and keeping in touch with them over video chats. So I think knowing that keeps me strong. Another thing is that our medical systems are not up to scratch. A lot of the state-owned hospitals didn't even have basic medical supplies before the pandemic hit, and so many hospitals reached full capacity. And I think especially for people from low-income families, those are the people that it really hits badly. People that don't have access to proper healthcare. So my heart really goes out to those people, and I consider myself and my family fortunate. And I think, that if there's anything we can learn from this, it's that we need each other and we need to support each other.
The deadly coronavirus is now in New Zealand. It was confirmed by the Prime Minister.
When coronavirus first hit, I was here in Shanghai, where I've lived for about 7 years now. We were all told not to go to work, but I couldn't just sit at home and do nothing, so I decided to make daily vlogs for Shanghai Daily. I think, though, in a way, doing vlogs every single day wasn't just a way for me to keep busy. It was also a way for me to stop myself from being scared, I guess. Sometimes I wasn't sure if my vlogs were any help, to be honest. But afterwards I started getting more and more comments from foreigners in Shanghai who told me they don't know how they would have got through it all without my daily update, so that was pretty awesome. During the early days of COVID-19, I decided to go and see my family in New Zealand, actually. To be quite honest, I was really shocked about how lax the New Zealand border was, and it turned out much of New Zealand was pretty shocked as well. My video went viral there, and within days our Prime Minister was forced to lock down the border. I like to think that my video played some part in that decision, because after that New Zealand did pretty well managing the virus and keeping cases and deaths quite low. Probably one of my more unique experiences during the early days of COVID in Shanghai was working at a close contacts quarantine hotel for a day. Now basically that's a hotel that's been taken over for use exclusively to quarantine anyone who's been found to have come into contact with a positive case. And back then that was usually people sitting within 3 rows of someone who had COVID on a plane returning to China. Now I'll tell you now though, if you haven't worn full protective gear, well, It is tough. It's absolutely and utterly uncomfortable. I had to wear full gear in order to be allowed to enter the quarantine zone. And I literally, the whole time, felt like my head was about to explode. I helped the crew signing in 2 new guests who had just been informed they were close contacts. I also helped with some other chores as well as delivering food to the rooms. Their protocols, they're honestly so amazing. After new guests checked in, we had to go to their room and walk backwards, following their entire path, sterilizing the entire environment. So it was pretty eye-opening. After dinner was served, I was finally able to get out of the quarantine zone and out of my protective gear. It took about probably 20 minutes to safely take every single layer off, sanitizing the whole way and making sure there was no path through any contamination. And by the time it was fully off, I can hand on heart tell you that was the best feeling ever. I truly think that the crew who work in these sites, wearing PPE for 8 or more hours a day, they're amazing. We owe so much to them. Another one of my interesting COVID stories was actually visiting Wuhan the day after the city opened again after their 76-day lockdown from the outside world. Now at that stage, don't forget, wide-scale lockdowns hadn't happened much across the rest of the world, so Wuhan was still quite unique at that point. I really wanted to find out what it was like for the people living there, so I met with some foreigners and locals and chatted about their struggles. Absolutely admiring the local people's spirit and their resilience for what they'd been through to protect not only China but the rest of the world.
The virus has killed more than 20,000. It's the worst hit country in Latin America. The region...
I guess everybody has lost someone or something. And I'm not different from anybody else. I've lost 2 of my paternal aunts. I've also lost my business, in great part because of COVID. But I have to say that the one thing that I've lost the most, that has touched me the most, is the loss of some friends. There were people in a group of friends from high school, from actually school, grammar school, all the way to high school, in my hometown, Colombia. And it was at that time of a lot of pressure where somebody went back to make jokes about the Wuhan virus and the China virus. And I found myself unable to accept that from an educated group of friends, from a group of friends that I care and that I love, and a group of friends who they've actually come to me for questions, they've actually come to me for answers, and I appreciate the fact that they try to do that. So this group of people, having actually heard my side of the story, heard China's side of the story, they still insisted on blaming it on China through a joke. So I removed myself from that. I cannot bear being in that kind of environment where racism is a joke. So for me, that's the biggest loss, the loss of a dear group of friends, long life friends that cannot manage to not be hateful and to not be racist when it comes to COVID. That's basically it.
The U.S. has recorded more than 1 million new COVID-19 infections on Monday. That's a world record for confirmed daily cases, though it's partly because of a reporting.
My experience during COVID was sort of unique. I had been living in China during the outbreak, and I used my YouTube channel to tell people about what was happening in China, to try to warn them. I thought that America was probably going to handle it a lot better than China did. I actually left with my family back to America on the same day that Donald Trump had enacted his travel ban. We arrived expecting quarantines and hazmat suits and facial masks, but unfortunately, we saw none of it. We arrived with the intention of quarantining, but we didn't even get recommended to. So we actually quarantined voluntarily. We bought an Airbnb and we stayed for 2 weeks before we left the hotel and left Chicago to visit my family in Detroit. We certainly didn't want to get my family sick, even if there was a chance of a chance. And so we stayed in America for a month. We were astonished. We knew that it was going to get bad here. We made a decision at a certain point, right around the time when people were bulk buying toilet paper, to return to China. And so we left O'Hare Airport on our way back to China. We were arriving to China the day of the enacted travel ban of people coming from America. And so we were able to witness what a truly prepared country will do. So when we arrived at Shanghai, there were hazmat suits, there was precautions at every place, there was enforced quarantining and QR codes. When we got to the quarantine hotel in the city that we lived, Ningbo, we were forced apart. My wife and child went in one hotel room and I had to stay in another for 14 days. It felt almost justified. It felt like, okay, they were taking it serious. There was a certain comfort in that. But it was very interesting to be a person bridging both gaps and traveling between countries both times, between America and China.
I'm Danny Haifong, journalist, author, and host of the YouTube channel The Left Lens. I live in New York City and remember the early days of the pandemic very well. I consider my experience unique because 2 months before New York City discovered its first case in March of 2020, I was traveling across China. I made many friends in China before any of us knew about the virus and kept in touch with one living in Wuhan. As I would go on and on about New York City's slow response to COVID that March, he was telling me about China's rapid and thorough public health measures to the point where Wuhan fully reopened in April of 2020, just 1 month after New York City finally responded to COVID-19. So I considered myself lucky to be able to speak with my friend in China over this period, even though back in New York City, what I was experiencing from that March to April time frame was a massive shortage in testing kits, masks, hand sanitizer, and other forms of personal protective equipment, as well as the hundreds of people per day who were dying of COVID-19 in New York City. I was working as a social worker at a senior center at the time and actually had to work for a few weeks in person as the COVID-19 virus was spreading rapidly, and the employer that I was working for had no idea what to do and didn't really have any guidance from the government as the city and the state were dragging their feet as to how to respond to all of this. I was also living with my wife's parents, both of whom are seniors, and they had multiple medical conditions that they were dealing with. So I'll never forget the fear of going to work and then coming home to family, feeling as though I was placing myself and loved ones at risk of a deadly pandemic, while also feeling like I didn't have any help or recourse from the government. Living in New York City during COVID-19 was a scary experience and remains so, mainly because public health measures still primarily fall upon the individual, fall upon myself and my loved ones to protect each other from COVID-19.
In my final year and a half at Nanjing University, I was one of the only foreign students on campus. I would go weeks or even months without seeing another foreign face around the university. This is the world of the pandemic, right? It was during that winter break of 2020 when almost all of us went overseas, either back to our home country or to travel. And during that time, the virus began, and the school sent out a warning saying, wait for the virus to end before you guys come back. And then I started looking at the data, and the virus was just going up and up and up. It was just not stopping. And I started getting concerned the borders were going to close. So I came back, despite the school saying not to, because I lived off campus. And shortly after I came back, the borders really did close. And those students that had been with me at Nanjing University and the neighboring universities, up until this day, they still have not been able to come back. People are always going on about Zoom and the metaverse and all these different methods of technology that can help us connect with each other during the COVID world, and I think those things are great for keeping in touch, but they really cannot replace an in-person connection. No metaverse and Zoom call is going to replace a walk with my parents and our dog through the neighborhood, as we used to do pretty much every day when I'm home. No metaverse is going to replace playing Scrabble with my mother while watching The Bachelor in the background, laughing about how stupid it is. So with that being the case, I've just decided I'm going to have to go back to the US even with the pandemic situation, because I'm an only child. And I haven't seen my parents in 2 years. Haven't seen my old friends or any of my other relatives. It has been so long. During these 2 years, my grandmother passed away, my best friend got married, my grandfather got dementia. I've just missed out on so many things, and that's just the struggle of life during a pandemic, right? So I'm planning to go back regardless of the pandemic situation, and I hope I will be able to make it back here within a reasonable amount of time.
Everyone, my name is Cyrus Jansen. I want to welcome you to one of the most important border crossings between the United States and Canada. I'm live on location here at the Peace Arch Memorial Park, a beautiful park that was constructed in 1921, 101 years ago, to celebrate the friendship and the brotherhood of the United States and Canada. In fact, the very letters at the top of this arch read, "Brethren, dwelling together in unity." Now, the United States and Canada have the longest international border in the world. In addition, the United States and Canada are the respective #1 trading partners for both countries. Our two countries have always had a very close relationship, but the COVID-19 pandemic shifted all of that, because for the first time in history, the very border that stands behind me was actually closed. And this presented a very unusual circumstance for American citizens like myself, who actually reside on this side of the border, here in the Canadian side. Now, as an American citizen, I always have the freedom and the ability to enter into America. However, I would be subjected to a 14-day self-isolated quarantine upon arrival back into Canada. With my job, my wife, my children living full-time here in Canada, that effectively meant for the first time in my entire life, I was cut off from returning home. Several times during the pandemic, I would drive my car down here, park and observe this beautiful green space, and just appreciate the amazing relationship between the United States and Canada. Here we are almost 2 years later since this pandemic started, and as you can see behind me, cars are rolling in, and once again, this beautiful Peace Arch border crossing is open. And the United States and Canada are pressing forward, pushing one foot in front of the other as we reopen this world and get back to normal. The Peace Arch stands as a forever symbol between the friendship of the United States and Canada. But for me, it will have an extra special meaning, as it also symbolizes a unique time in our lives where something as simple as a border crossing became a privilege and something that we will forever never forget.
Going through the pandemic for me was definitely a make or break sort of moment. I had just done a trip across Russia at the end of 2019 and was very fortunate that I got back literally a month before COVID was really in the news and everybody was scrambling to get a flight home. But when things began to shut down, every country closed its borders, I really just had to stay put in Canada and was really questioning how I was going to move forward with my channel. I think it was around April where the first country that I remember really advertising that they were open to tourism, you know, please come, as long as you were from a country that didn't have super high COVID numbers, was Greece. Greece was really the first country that was welcoming tourism, so it was at the end of May that I think I booked my ticket, and then end of July, I was off to Athens. But before this, I actually had to make a very big decision where I knew I couldn't sublet my apartment as I had done in the past. Like, the Toronto tourism industry had basically been decimated. So I knew that either I would have to stay in Toronto and live in my apartment, or I would basically have to give it up and sell everything. So obviously I went with sell everything, and that was a very big change for me in my life, where I sold almost everything I had or gave it away. And ever since, for the last 2 years, I have basically been on the road. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. And also, I did end up getting COVID, but it was after I was vaccinated. So thankfully, it wasn't that serious of a case. And all of my family and friends who had it didn't have a serious case either. So in a way, I feel incredibly grateful that me personally, I haven't really faced any severe restrictions or health problems during this crazy time, because I know that is not the case for everyone.
Hi, my name is Takuya Umeki. I'm teaching at the Vancouver Technical Secondary School in Vancouver. We were having quite significant issues and trying to maintain connections, especially for students online. I was trying to basically chasing students down, and after 1 week or 2 weeks online, when they come back, they basically lost everything that they are supposed to learn. I basically had to kind of start from scratch every week when they come into class, and that's simply that's the biggest challenge I faced.
Hi, my name is Mary. Our company name is Maryway Travel Service Ltd.
What percentage of your business was Chinese people buying tickets to go home?
It's around 70%, I think.
So then during the pandemic, that was
shut down. Yeah, we switched to the target from the international customer to the local customers. Right now, we're still waiting because there are a lot of restriction of China government.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people, they want to fly to China. They still cannot do that.
Right.
So they are waiting.
What do you think about the future of travel? Do you think one day we will go back to normal?
So yeah, I have this faith. I know to waiting that the business go up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, my name's Pete. I'm also a firefighter in town. When COVID finally did get here, it didn't get here like it got here in other places. It kind of just feathered its way in. We had some people in the hospitals and some people sick. People weren't dying in the streets. At one time, COVID did really kick in. It got into our senior living facilities. It got into where our extended cares and where our most vulnerable live, our seniors. And they had shuttered the doors on that and thought that would be just fine. Where they didn't shutter the doors were the back doors, where all the staff came in. This COVID thing really amplified depressions. It amplified people struggling. It amplified people that were struggling before financially, were really struggling. We did have a small fentanyl problem before, but it really blew up on this. So fentanyl really kind of kicked in. And as of now, at the end of the month here, we are opening up wide. We've learned to live with it. The government has said we're going to be living with it.
I'm Avenue X. 2022 is my 5th year of becoming an YouTuber, focusing on reviews on Chinese television series since 2017. I'm a Chinese national who currently resides in Canada. It is no doubt that COVID has changed many people's lives for the last 2 years. In that, I consider myself to be one of those super lucky ones. Without being aware of what I was doing, I have decided a couple of years ago, before COVID happened, that I wasn't going to do a 9-to-5 job. My YouTube channel was already being running on a very regular schedule when COVID happened. I also had an online business set up about a year before it happened. And I'm very lucky that I can go about my life pretty much 90% the same post-COVID as before it. And I just happen to be one of those people who can entertain myself very well. If I have internet, I pretty much can live in a cave and then I'd be happy about that. As As a human being, the things I do to satisfy my social needs were already pretty much online before COVID happened. So I just continued living my life. That is why I say I am one of those super lucky people who have received very little impact. Personally, for me, the worst thing because of COVID was I haven't been able to travel back to China. The last time I was back in China was summer 2019. And since then, I haven't been able to go back, haven't been able to see my parents, my family members, my friends. During this time, 2 of my close relatives have passed, not due to COVID, due to other conditions, but I wasn't able to go back to attend their funerals. Also, I am from Chongqing, which in my opinion is the greatest city in China when it comes to food, the best food. There have been many nights during those 2 years that I have been suddenly captured by the desire of eating dishes that can only be made in my hometown, and I cannot recreate them where I am. I know there are far more worse problems people suffer from COVID, and these little things in my life I can deal with. So that's my personal story of how my life gets impacted by COVID, and probably the least dramatic type of stories you can come across. Ironically, I run a channel that's talking about dramas all the time. Every day I wake up, I hope I see a world that's COVID-free. I cannot wait for the day when everything can go back to normal. Go to see the places we want to see, meet the people we want to meet face to face, and then eat the food we want.
Thailand has reported the first case of coronavirus found outside of China. The patient arrived at Bangkok Suvarnabhumi airport from...
How much did you actually lose, do you think, through COVID, through the 2 years of actually closing?
I cannot say how much, but a lot.
It's just, you couldn't put a price on it, I guess.
Yes, cannot.
Because when actually COVID hit, you know, were you fairly busy before COVID came, do you think?
Before COVID, busy.
Yeah.
And after that, the COVID come and business, anything fall down.
Right.
Yes, but we have to spend for everything also, not cost like a barcode. I have to spend for electric. I have to spend for water, anything. For rent, anything.
So have you made up for the loss, do you think, since being open for 4 months?
For the 4 months, you mean about business, yeah?
Yeah, since you've been reopened?
Yeah. We just get back only 40% of the customer back.
Right.
Yes.
Because Wuhan being a very tourist-orientated city, a lot of expats or a lot of tourists actually haven't came back.
And right now is a customer from Bangkok, from Chiang Mai, from Phuket, from Pattaya.
Right.
Yes, it's like people live in Thailand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think tourists are going to come back to Thailand?
I think they will come back, but take time, maybe 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure 100%, but they will be back here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I cannot say to you how many percent. Yes. Thanks.
Here's a cheers. I wish you nothing but the best in the future.
I hope you can help us in the future to be back like before.
So welcome to a sad day at my home here at Pattaya, Thailand. It's sometimes called the City of Fun. We'll see about that. And by the way, you can call me Lucas. Today I've come to the north side of town, to the Bang Lamung Hospital, probably one of the best known public hospitals in town. And at least for now anyway, I believe the epicenter of all things COVID. So although the town here has been suffering for going on 2 years, I believe the saddest chapter may be unfolding right here, right now. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But first, some background. Pattaya is almost 100% a tourist town. When the daily flow of tourists stopped in early 2020, the town entered a downward spiral. I've told many of these stories on my YouTube channel as they were being written. But in short, a brief synopsis. Unemployment here almost became the rule. It was no longer the exception. Homelessness and vagrancy rose sharply, and scenes of people sleeping or living on the streets became much too common. Speaking of streets, a tourist town like Pattaya is generally abuzz with all-night partygoers, special events, live music, and certainly a vibrance, which all but disappeared overnight. The festive atmosphere was exchanged for food lines. Lots and lots of food lines. So some people no longer had the means even for basic sustenance. The people weren't the only ones hungry. The animals were hungry too. There was so much aid being given to support the community, the regular charities, the charities who take care of the less fortunate, disabled, or affirmed, people who ordinarily and under the best circumstances can't provide for themselves. Some of those organizations started going without. So I guess you could say it's been a very long road to hoe for the people here. I've done what I could to help along the way, as have many residents and retirees who live here, which is maybe why what I find here today is the most heartbreaking of all. You see, up until now, the hardships have been mostly economic. The lockdowns and restrictions were more precautionary measures while we waited for vaccines and tried to slow the spread. But here we are, 2 years in, with hopes of a rebound and recovery this year, and this is the scene. This is now what a normal morning looks like at one of the city's main hospitals. Tourists have been returning now for several months. Many businesses have been allowed to resume trade, and the town is starting to feel at least somewhat vibrant again, at least when compared to the last 2 years anyway. But the new variant has hit hard, and it seems everyone in town is sick. So the story here continues. What is the human cost of COVID for the people here of Pattaya? I wish I could say it was just the economic disaster over the last 2 years caused by lack of global tourism, but that may not be the final word. The next month or two will be crucial, critical here. Will they be able to shake off this new variant and get tourist levels back to or close to the pre-COVID levels? Or have the last 2 years just been a preamble to a much longer story?
Hello, please let me introduce myself as Johnny. I've been living in Thailand for the previous 12 years. Just last year, we went and visited 4 camps. Now these camps were like slums. In these slums were people that have lost their job, that had lost their job due to COVID. 7 people live in this shack here.
When raining comes, the water first here a lot. This is same.
Yeah, right. So like river through here.
Yeah.
The smell. Here we got some recycled bottles, so they obviously collect these and get money returned. Is that right? Yeah. It's pretty much just a dumping ground. I feel really bad because I was dry reaching before, but the stench here is just mind-blowing. You can't describe it. And I'm wearing a mask. Thank God for the mask. It's just so tragic. It's just so tragic. You can't move it. No. Yeah, see how his legs are like that. So the wheelchair's broken. Like it's all broken. He's got nowhere to put his feet. So I made a video, and 14 amazing subscribers contacted me, and they said, "Well, John, let's do something." Together with 14 subscribers, they contacted me. I said, "Okay, let's do a food run." So with 14 subscribers, we managed to raise about 165,000 baht. One truck that's already full, and we got this truck here. Righty, Carl. How are you? Good? Look what we got here for you. Huh? Look what we got for you, huh? Huh? This is for you. A new wheelchair, look. Look at that. Huh? For you. Very good. That's his old one there, so you can see how screwed up it was. Okay, this is for you also. 3,000 baht. Okay, to help you get to the hospital to buy some water. Okay. Very good. That's from Tony. No, don't thank me, thank Tony. Okay? Very good. You're a good man. Wow, look at that, huh? Hey, very good. Very good. So as you can see, it's heartbreaking. It's actually absolutely heartbreaking to see how those families were living like that. You know, they didn't get any help from the government, or very little help from the government. They were pretty much by themselves, that was it. They were surviving. They were surviving, just surviving. It's heartbreaking. Okay, so this is the human cost of COVID in Thailand.
Hello everyone, my name is Tim, and I live in southern Leyte, Philippines, central Philippines, the Visayas area, and it's absolutely gorgeous out here, as you can tell behind me. It's a wonderful place to be, but it's been a real interesting place to be during the pandemic. And actually, when the pandemic started in 2000, I was actually visiting Thailand. I was visiting a friend in Thailand, Alex, and we looked at each other and we really just said, hey, this is going to change so many things about the world. Sure enough, in fact, it was. I returned back to the Philippines with my family. I have one son who was born just literally days before the pandemic started, and a wife who I married just soon before that. And so we've spent most of our married life and my son's life in the pandemic, and now it's just started to clear up, where we can travel and go different places and see the beauty of the Philippines like you see behind me. My experience for quite a while was very challenging. I was in a foreign country. I've only been here for three years, so I'm relatively new to the Philippines. And we were, from my understanding, in the Philippines, we had the longest lockdown in the world. Even as I stand here talking to you today, still, my wife has just begun her college courses again, in-person classes. They're only doing it half-time. The children are still not even in school. We just got hit by a Category 4 typhoon. Not in the area that I stand here talking to you, but very close nearby. It is now March of 2022. And so it had a profound effect on my life. In some ways, as a vlogger, it helped me because a lot of people were online. So the digital economy was really flourishing. But in other ways, it was an incredible challenge because I was used to being a travel vlogger, and I had to change the way that I had my business model from someone who thought that he'd be traveling and going places like I had just been in Thailand filming, to someone that was primarily going to be based having to make stories and tell people about my life in a geographically constrained area. But for us, it was being geographically confined. I traveled the year before the pandemic about 90,000 miles. I went around the world a couple times traveling, so it really radically changed my life. And so I think we're all learning to live in a little different way. But thank you for letting me share my story. I'm really looking forward to the freedoms that we'll hopefully get back to travel, to learn, and to meet new people.
It was a normal day at work. As an international news analyst, I was scrolling through my news feed and received several notifications of an unknown case of pneumonia around December 2019. It was terrifying. Nothing like this has ever happened in our generation. Tight quarantine, face mask, social distancing became mandatory and an integral part of our daily life. There was so much fear, and I really struggled to make sense of all of this. I was one of the lucky ones who have had a wholesome university life before the pandemic hit. But the pandemic have left many Chinese international students in a dilemma. They could either make an expensive, potentially dangerous journey home, or find a nice place to stay on campus. But what's there to left? Libraries were closed. Online classes were the new normal. Students couldn't really access the support that they needed. Many of my fellow schoolmates suffered from depression, loneliness during their self-isolation. When you are stuck at the house by yourself in a foreign country with no one to reach out to, it is going to be a huge challenge. I haven't really returned home for quite a while due to strict corporate restrictions, and I have no idea when I will ever see my parents again. So I made a bold move, left my job in Beijing, and returned home. It was fear, essentially. Fear of never getting to see your parents, fear of never holding hands with your loved ones, fear of never getting to say goodbye. I know COVID really turned this world upside down, but it also forces us to rethink our life and consider changes from prioritizing our families and reshaping career paths. And I think now, more than ever, it is urgent for us to be prepared, be knowledgeable, and not to panic.
Some patients lost several close family members, and they couldn't see them for the last time before they passed away because it is a highly contagious virus. Some patients was battling with the virus in ICUs with several life-supporting machines on for over 60 days, and they still didn't make it. Some patients recovered physically, but they never really did mentally. There's a scar in their hearts forever. Those are the real stories of real people I witnessed when I was a reporter in Wuhan under the 3-month-long lockdown. In the beginning, it was quite a scary time because we didn't know that much about the virus yet. The city was quiet, empty. It's like someone pressed the pause button for the entire city. It wasn't just a difficult time for patients, for medics who had been working non-stop to save patients, for community workers who had been working non-stop to keep the city running, for the rest of the citizens who didn't leave their apartments for 3 months just to make sure the city can get back on track as soon as possible. It was also the toughest time. I know many people were suffering from PTSD long after the virus was contained. But in the darkest time, you see the strongest will of human beings. And during that time, no one gave up. The entire city was really pulled together. So many people, including medics, community workers, volunteer drivers, they really put themselves in the front line to save others. And I know a patient who donated her plasma to severely ill patients as soon as she recovered. During the time when doctors were still trying to find the best way to save COVID-19 patients, the plasma from recovered patients really helped pull the severely ill patients back from the brink of death. And she told me, I know what kind of pain my family went through, so I will do whatever I can to help as many people as I can to not experience the same pain. That's why she donated her plasma. That's why she became a volunteer community worker. That's the people of Wuhan. They really helped save so many people from this pandemic. They are indeed the heroes.
当时是大概是在大年30，我在值班，然后就听到群里面就有这样的一个任务，就是可以要去支援湖北，然后我就第一个报了名，这样的。然后就接到，然后准备做了一些准备工作之后，我们就在初2出发去了湖北孝感。我们到了酒店，然后酒店就是整个都很安静，就整个的话，它整个的基本上大家都在家里面，就按政府要求在家里面进行隔离。然后下雪了，很冷的。就我晚上我都不脱衣服睡的，就是我都要盖2床被子。我们住在8楼，楼下1到7楼都是收发热病人的。我们初步统计了下，在那个地方的话，阳性率，新冠肺炎的阳性率大概有70-80%左右。我当时都没有跟我妈说，因为我想，因为她肯定会担心我呀。但是我后面去了，隔了20多天，然后我才给他讲说我现在在孝感的，就是在看一线，他才知道。就我记得我吃到过最好吃的草莓，就是他们当地种草莓的农民给我们送来的，农民也想给我们一点尝一点甜味儿，然后他就捐到我们这个点，然后我觉得真的是非常好吃。就是我们这一批所有的队员都是平安回来的，就是没有任何一例新冠感染。我觉得真的要好好活的，因为人只能活一次。 就说你想做什么事情啊，就是一定要努力去。就说你想要干什么，你现在趁自己的年轻，有这样的机会，那你一定要去尽力的去实现自己的愿望和抱负。
My name is Xiale. I work in the second affiliated hospital of the Chongqing Medical University. I'm an oncologist, yes, treat the cancer patients, yeah.
Do you know any doctors that were called from Chongqing that had to go and assist in Wuhan? Do you know any of your friends or other doctors?
Yes. Some of our classmates went to Wuhan to fight with the virus. So they work very hard and save a lot of people. Just for an oncologist, do my best to take care of our patients. I think maybe this is the other way to fight the virus. So cancer patients are specific and they need ongoing and regular treatment. In face of COVID, so we must take a closer care of our patients to ensure the consistency of the treatment cannot be interrupted. All patients of our department are in good condition and they are free from COVID. It's true that we are closer in face of COVID, but our government is doing every effort to protect every citizen. It's true, we have made our sacrifices, like less traveling, but what can be compared to life?
Doctor, if your child becomes a doctor, will you let him or her fight the virus in the front or the first line?
Yeah, I have a son, he is 8 years old. Yeah, 100% sure. So I know with great power comes great responsibility. So this is the responsibility and honor of a doctor. So as his mom, I support him fight the virus at the first line.
Fear, uncertainty, doubt, isolation, but also a sense of community. What a weird time it was being on the ground in China while we were all trying to figure out what this virus of unknown origin and unknown potency was all about. As we sat at home, we would check our local virus tracking app, looking at the map, seeing little colored dots like a line of Christmas lights pop up around us as there were new cases or buildings that went into full lockdown, slowly making its way closer and closer to us. We had no idea how the world would forever be changed by this virus, and certainly didn't know that the rest of the world wouldn't end up pulling together well enough to also end local transmissions and starve this virus out. It was tough, it wasn't easy, but that's where the sense of community came in. We all knew this is what needed to be done, and we were all in this together. You know, my youngest child at the time, even after just a couple of months of staying at home as much as possible, stopped realizing what the outside world was like. I vividly remember when we finally had the virus sufficiently under control. The first time we took my youngest out to the garden downstairs, he was feeling the grass and looking up at the sky with a new kind of wonder that reminded us those lockdowns represented a significant portion of his life. But even after we beat it, we'd still continually be hearing from Western media that China's numbers were fake and that millions were continually dying, long after our lives had gotten back to normal, and while most of us in China didn't even know anyone who knew anyone else who caught COVID, let alone died from it. This bizarre coverage resulted in the real story of what we all did here to pull our weight in one mass and swift upfront effort, and the results of those efforts never reaching large audiences outside of China. Is this part of the reason so many people felt like fighting the virus was a lost cause? When the virus hit the shores of America, or at least when proper testing began, I knew countless numbers of people who caught COVID, and even some of my mother's extended family passed away. Because of the situation and the rest of the world, the story of COVID in China is of course not over, and perhaps everyone really will have to get used to the idea of living with this. But there are still so many important takeaways from how things unfolded. The story and legacy of COVID that'll hopefully be told in this documentary and heard by many should go beyond acting just as a time capsule of this period in history, but hopefully, at least in some way, at the same time, can remind people about the consequences of agenda-driven dishonest reporting, which is a theme that comes up in a lot of my other work. We're still in a period of great geopolitical turmoil, but I hope one day there'll be a calm in the storm that opens up long enough, that allows us to see clear enough, to figure out and to be able to understand that whatever the future holds, there needs to be provisions in place and room to put aside all political differences, no matter how big they may seem, in order to come together as an entire planet to solve whatever the next urgent global crisis may be.
When I produced this documentary, I wanted to share my experiences with you, the viewers. I decided I would like to ask you, the viewers, some questions instead. Do you trust your governments after this? Did this bring you closer to friends and family? Many marriages, friendships, governments, and businesses have been put under immense pressure. The clock is ticking with no end in sight. Will these decisions influence future elections in your country? Seriously, what is the value of a passport anymore? The novel coronavirus crept its way through almost every country across the globe, killing over 5.6 million people while we filmed this documentary. We may not know the mental and social health toll of lockdowns for some time, but we should attempt to include these efforts in our assessments. Why? Because it's real. The world after COVID-19 is unlikely to return to the world that was. Are governments working together in our best interest? I will leave that for all of you to discuss below in the comments. Thanks for watching.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have just watched some of the most powerful true stories from people around the world. But what have we learned from today's film? Many things. The first is that COVID-19 has had an effect on nearly every person in the planet. Fast forward to today, here in 2022, and we are entering the third year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Certain things have gone surprisingly well, notably the rapid development of COVID vaccines and testing measures that have allowed our world to somewhat return to normal. But my question to you is, where do we go from here? Will we have faith in science? When will this world finally be healed? Will the terms social distancing and lockdowns fade away from our lives and our vocabulary? Have the governments we trusted delivered on their promises? Humanity has been tested on a global scale. People have been separated and even locked out of their own countries. Relationships of all aspects have come under enormous pressure. We hope this documentary has shed light on the human cost of the world pandemic. We can only hope we have learned from this, and as the world continues to open up, we must never forget that we are all in this together. I have faith that we will soon see a brighter day.